The moment I stepped onto the ship, I should have felt excitement. The brochures promised endless buffets, glittering pools, and nights filled with laughter under the stars. Instead, an unease slid over me like a second skin. The ocean stretched, out in every direction, a dark, endless sheet that seemed eager to swallow us whole. The ship itself gleamed, polished to perfection, yet there was something hollow about its shine, like a smile hiding broken teeth. The crew greeted me warmly, but their smiles were too wide, too rehearsed, as if someone had stitched them onto their faces. Their eyes didn't quite match the expressions, flat and watchful, like mirrors that reflected nothing back. I told myself it was just nerves, the natural strangeness of leaving land behind. But that night, lying in my cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being studied. Laughter echoed faintly through the halls, but it was offbeat, delayed as though the sound was caught in a loop. I pressed my ear to the wall, and the vibration felt almost like a heartbeat. From the very first night, I knew this voyage would not be the escape I'd hoped for. It was the beginning of something I couldn't yet name. When I woke the next morning, sunlight spilled across my cabin in warm streaks, and for a moment I almost believed the unease from the night before had been a trick of exhaustion. I decided to start fresh, showered quickly, and made my way to the lounge where I'd spent the previous night. The bartender had been kind, chatty even, and I was eager to see a familiar face. He was there polishing glasses, his name tag catching the light. I smiled, leaning on the counter. "Morning. Thanks again for those cocktails last night. You've got a heavy hand with the rum." He paused, brows knitting. "I'm sorry, have we met?" At first I laughed. I thought he was joking, but the confusion in his eyes didn't waver. "You don't remember me?" I was sitting right there. I pointed to the stool I'd occupied. He shook his head. "First day on shift today. You must be mistaken." A chill rippled through me, but I forced a smile and left. Maybe he'd just forgotten. It happens. Back in the hallway, I ran into my cabin steward, a young man who had brought me extra towels the night before. "Hey, thanks again for the towels," I said. His expression mirrored the bartender's, blank, polite, as if he were meeting me for the first time. That's when the laughter of last night replayed in my memory, warped and looping, and my stomach sank. As I walked down the long corridors, I couldn't shake the sound of footsteps behind. Each time I turned, the hallway lay empty. Doors clicked shut on their own, though I hadn't seen anyone enter. The walls seemed to hum faintly, vibrating with a rhythm too steady to be coincidence. By the time I reached the deck, the morning sun felt harsher, glaring instead of comforting. I leaned against the railing, staring at the ocean that surrounded us in every direction, endless and suffocating. I told myself I was imagining things, that it was just part of being at sea. Still, I couldn't ignore the sharp truth crawling under my skin. Something was wrong here. That night, the ship came, alive. Music poured from the ballroom, golden light spilling through open doors as passengers gathered in glittering dresses and pressed suits. I told myself I needed this, a distraction, something normal to anchor me. Inside, chandeliers swayed gently with the ship's motion, and a live band played songs that made the floor pulse with energy. I found myself talking to a couple at the bar, Emma and David. They were warm, easy to laugh with, the kind of people you feel you've known longer than a few hours. We clinked glasses, swapped stories, and before I realized it, I was dancing with them, spinning under the lights until my chest ached with breathless joy. For the first time since boarding, the dread loosened its grip. Maybe I'd been overthinking. Maybe the cruise would be fine after all. But the next morning shattered that hope. I spotted Emma and David at breakfast and waved eagerly, sliding into the seat across from them. Their smiles faltered with polite confusion. "I'm sorry," Emma said, her fork hovering. "Do we know you?" My stomach dropped. I reminded them of the party, the dancing, the toasts. They exchanged nervous glances and shook their heads. Panic bloomed in my chest. I fumbled for my phone, desperate to prove it happened. I had filmed snippets the night before. Laughing faces, clinking glasses, my own voice narrating. But when I opened the gallery, the files flickered, distorted into static before dissolving into black screens. Every video was corrupted, as if the night had been erased. The rest of the day blurred into unease. Each interaction I had seemed fragile, temporary, like writing in sand just before the tide rushes in. By evening, I realized the terrifying pattern. Every morning, people forgot me. Not just strangers, every connection, every conversation gone. I was the only one who carried the memories forward. And that night, when the music started again, I stood frozen in the doorway of the ballroom. The band played the same song as before. The crowd cheered and the laughter rang out as if the party had never ended. I was trapped in a cycle no one else could see. By the third day, I couldn't take it anymore. Every smile that slid past me, every blank stare that pretended yesterday hadn't happened, it was driving me into the walls of my own mind. I needed answers, and I knew I wouldn't find them sipping watered-down cocktails or forcing small talk with people who would forget me by morning. So that night, when the corridors thinned of passengers, I slipped away. The guest decks were polished and bright, but deeper inside the ship, the atmosphere changed. The carpet gave way to steel floors, narrow and dimly lit, the air heavy with a damp, metallic tang. These were not halls meant for tourists. The silence pressed on my ears, broken only by the creak of the ship shifting against the waves. Then I heard them, voices low and hushed, spilling through a vent. They spoke in a language I couldn't understand, the syllables rolling like water over jagged rocks. I froze, straining to listen, but when footsteps approached, I ducked into the nearest door. The room was cold, lined with filing cabinets and shelves stacked with binders yellowed from age. And on the far wall, a series of corkboards. My breath caught. Photographs, hundreds of them, faces of passengers arranged in rows, each marked with thick red slashes across the eyes. I moved closer, my pulse hammering, scanning face after face, until the world tilted beneath me. There I was. My own photo, pinned near the center, the red slash already carved across it like a wound. My throat closed, my knees nearly buckled. It meant this had all happened before, didn't it? I'd been here, I'd been seen, and then I'd been erased. The claustrophobia hit me like a wave. The walls seemed to shrink, the photos crowding closer, all those vacant eyes staring through their crimson scars. I stumbled backward, knocking a chair to the floor, the sound cracking through the silence. The whispers outside stopped. In the breathless stillness that followed, I knew they had heard me. Whoever they were, they knew I had seen too much. I ran, heart slamming in my chest, the corridors twisting endlessly as if the ship itself was trying to keep me lost. I finally forced myself to the captain's quarters, driven by equal parts terror and rage. The corridors leading there felt longer than they should, as if the ship stretched to resist me. When I was ushered inside, the captain barely looked, up from his papers, his face carved from stone. I told him everything, the bartender, the couple, the corrupted videos, the photographs with slashed faces. My voice cracked as I begged for the truth. He listened in silence, then slid a thin ledger across the desk. "Your name," he said coldly, "isn't on the passenger manifest. You're not on this ship." I stared at the neat lines of ink. Every name accounted for except mine. My chest hollowed out like the air had been stolen. "That's impossible," I whispered, but his eyes gave nothing back. He simply dismissed me with a gesture, as though I were nothing more than a nuisance. That night I dreamt I was sinking. Cold water filled my lungs as pale hands dragged me deeper. When I woke, my sheets clung to me, soaked through, and the taste of salt stung my lips. It was no dream. From then on, the crew avoided me entirely. Conversations cut off when I entered a room. Some passengers blurred mid-sentence, their faces softening like smoke before vanishing altogether. Even the mirrors betrayed me. My reflection grew faint, delayed until one night it didn't appear at all. And then came the whispers. At first, soft and distant, rising from beneath the floorboards. By the second night, I could hear them clearly, curling around me in the dark. They spoke my name over and over in voices both tender and cruel. When I pressed my ear against the cold glass of my porthole, the ocean answered back, whispering from the black depths. I no longer knew what was real. The ship had become a maze of echoes, a stage where I was the only one who remembered yesterday. And with every passing moment I felt the sea pulling at me harder, calling me to join the silence beneath. I woke to the sting of cold air on my skin, the sky bruised with dawn. My body ached as though I'd been carried, and when I opened my eyes I was lying on the deck. The ship was silent, unnaturally so. No clinking dishes from breakfast service, no laughter echoing down the halls, no hum of engines beneath my feet. Just stillness. I pulled myself upright, but my muscles resisted, heavy and unyielding, as if some unseen weight pinned me in place. The horizon stretched wide, and for the first time I could see land, faint and shimmering in the distance. Salvation, so close it hurt to look at. Yet when I tried to take a step, nothing happened. My body would not obey. Panic rose in my throat, but before I could cry out, I felt breath against my ear. Hot, intimate, impossible. A voice whispered, calm and final. We never remember the dead. The words echoed inside me, a verdict I could not escape. My vision blurred, the world tilting, and for a moment I couldn't tell if I was still on the deck or already sinking beneath the waves. Then everything went dark. The first sunrise felt like magic. I remember standing at the rail, the sea calm as glass, the horizon bleeding gold into pink as if the sky itself was alive. I thought to myself, this is why people sail. This is why you trade land for water. I soaked in every second, the air crisp, the laughter of early risers drifting behind me. But the next morning it happened again. Not just another sunrise, the same one. The same streak of fire across the clouds. The same gull swooping low over the bow. The same woman in a red robe gasping softly beside me. Every detail matched, as if the world had been copied and pasted. By the third morning, I wasn't enchanted anymore. I was terrified. The horizon bloomed exactly as it had before, every second replaying like a cruel performance staged only for me. People smiled, talked, moved as though they'd never seen it before, while I stood frozen, my heart pounding. That's when the truth began to sink in. This wasn't a vacation, this was a trap, and whatever force held me here, it wanted me to watch the same dawn forever. That first day felt perfect, almost cinematic, the way vacations are supposed to. I woke with the gentle roll of the ocean and a mind still buzzing from the sunrise. The ship brimmed with life, families by the pool, older couples strolling hand in hand, the air salted with sea breeze and fried food drifting up from the buffet. I told myself to let go, to lean into the moment. For hours I wandered the deck, swapping stories with strangers, laughing too loudly over cocktails that tasted stronger than they should have. By evening, I'd fallen in with a small group of passengers who welcomed me as though I'd known them forever. We clinked glasses under string lights and danced to a band that seemed determined to play until their fingers bled. I felt the ocean air cool against my skin, warm laughter wrapping me in a comfort I hadn't realized I'd been missing. For the first time in ages, I went to bed smiling, lulled to sleep by the hum of the ship. The next morning shattered that peace. The sunrise, exactly the same. The same streak of crimson fire licking the edges of the clouds, the same gull cutting across the bow, even the same woman gasping in her red robe. I laughed nervously, convincing myself it was déjà vu, just my brain playing tricks. But the details wouldn't stop. At breakfast, a waiter tripped and dropped a tray of glasses, shattering them across the floor. And later at lunch, it happened again, at the exact same moment, in the exact same way. A child cried by the pool, his scream echoing at the same pitch, the same second as though rehearsed. Conversations with my new friends looped strangely, lines I swore I'd heard them say before spilling out like scripted dialogue. I told myself it was coincidence, a trick of memory. But deep inside, dread began to coil. The ship wasn't just carrying me forward, it was holding me still. And every sunrise seemed less like a beginning, and more like a warning I couldn't yet understand. By the third morning, the sunrise felt like a sick joke. I told myself I wouldn't just stand there and watch it happen again, so I forced a new routine. Instead of heading to the upper deck, I cut through a lower hallway, taking turns I'd never taken before. I skipped breakfast in the main hall and grabbed a stale muffin from a side cafe instead. I avoided the pool, avoided the laughing tourists I knew would be there. I told myself if I changed enough pieces, maybe the day would break free from whatever cycle had me pinned. But it didn't. No matter how many detours I made, the same things unfolded. The waiter still dropped his tray. The same child still wailed by the pool, even when I wasn't there to hear it. Conversations repeated, like recordings. Emma, one of the women I'd met, laughed at the same joke at the same time, her voice echoing in my skull. It wasn't life. It was theater. A script playing on a loop, and I was the only one cursed to know. By noon, paranoia chewed at me. I started recording. I stood on deck with my phone clenched tight, filming the sky as the horizon cracked open, in the same impossible blaze of light. I filmed the gull swooping low, the woman in her robe. I whispered into the mic. This is the third time. This is happening again. But the next morning, the videos were gone. Not deleted, not corrupted. Just gone like they had never existed. My gallery was empty except for meaningless shots of the ocean. I felt unhinged, pacing the deck as everyone else smiled and sipped their drinks, blind to the repetition. I tried to tell one of the crew, desperate to be believed, but his face remained placid, his words robotic. Everything is fine, please enjoy the cruise. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the ship, certain that if I closed my eyes, tomorrow would only drag me back to the same cruel dawn. And when the first glow crept across the curtains, my chest tightened. I already knew what was waiting outside. I couldn't live another day pretending nothing was wrong. If the ship wanted me to believe this was all normal, then I had to go where I wasn't supposed to. Late that night, when most passengers were asleep and the music from the lounge had finally died down, I slipped past a service door near the dining hall. The polished carpets gave way to metal floors, the air colder and tinged with bleach and something sour, like seawater left to rot. The crew corridors felt different, narrower, darker, lined with doors marked in codes instead of names. Pipes rattled overhead, dripping condensation onto my shoulders. Every sound echoed too loudly, each footstep bouncing back as though someone else was following close behind. That's when I heard it. Two voices murmuring just around the bend. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to hear. Their words were muffled, but one phrase cut through like a blade. The passenger who noticed. My blood iced. They were talking about me. Heart hammering, I pushed deeper into the maze until I stumbled upon a door left slightly ajar. Inside was a room that shouldn't have existed. Screens covered the walls, each one playing grainy footage. Passengers, laughing, swimming, eating, always repeating the same motions. It was like watching ghosts act out fragments of memory. Then I saw myself. On one monitor, I stood at the deck's railing, my body still, my face hollow, watching the sunrise loop endlessly. Another screen showed me sitting alone in the dining hall, whispering to no one, my lips moving in perfect sync with a version of me from a day before. It wasn't live, it was layered, the same day stacked on top of itself again and again. My stomach twisted as the realization sank in. The ship wasn't moving forward. It was folding time, trapping us in a ritual that erased the truth while forcing us to repeat the performance. The passengers weren't living. They were echoes, recycled roles in a script that reset with every dawn. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat, knowing I'd seen too much. And worse, knowing the crew already knew I had. I went straight to the captain. My hands shook the whole walk there, but I didn't care who saw me. The corridors seemed to stretch, every step dragging, but eventually I stood before his door and knocked until my fists hurt. When he finally answered, his uniform was immaculate, his face expressionless, as if he'd been waiting for me. I poured everything out, the looping sunrises, the repeating conversations, the control room filled with screens. My voice cracked, but I demanded the truth. For a long moment he just stared, his silence heavier than the sea pressing against the hull. Then, with a calmness that hollowed me out, he said, "Some people aren't meant to leave the sea. You're one of them." No argument, no denial, just a verdict. That night I dreamed I was drowning. Cold hands wrapped around my ankles, dragging me into the black. Salt water rushed into my lungs, burning, choking, until I woke gasping. My sheets clung to me, drenched, and the air reeked of brine. My hair, my skin, everything was slick with seawater. The ship wasn't hiding its curse anymore. Passengers glitched before my eyes, movement snagging like broken film reels. A woman lifted her glass, froze mid-motion, then reset, laughing the same laugh again. In mirrors, I found no reflection, only empty deck stretching behind the glass. Then the ocean itself seemed alive. Every crash against the hull whispered my name, soft at first, then louder, like a chorus urging me closer. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the sound came from inside me, filling my chest with its tide. The world blurred. I couldn't tell if I was still walking the decks or already swallowed whole. And in that moment, I realized the captain hadn't been warning me. He'd been sentencing me. The final morning, I dragged myself onto the deck with a single, desperate prayer, that this sunrise would be different. My body felt hollow, as if the ocean had already emptied me from the inside out. The horizon glowed faintly, the first blush of dawn spreading like a wound in the sky. For a heartbeat, I let myself hope. But then it happened again. The same colors, bleeding in the same order, the same stillness clinging to the air. Only this time something was missing. The deck was empty. No laughter, no chatter, not even the sound of footsteps. The ship groaned like an abandoned carcass, hollow and echoing. I gripped the railing, whispering to myself that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't alone. Yet the sun itself betrayed me, rising slowly until it stopped, frozen halfway above the horizon. The sky hung unnaturally still, as if the world had jammed. My chest clenched, panic clawing up my throat. That's when I felt breath against my ear, warm and intimate. A voice whispered, "The sunrise isn't repeating. You are." And then there was nothing, just silence, just stillness, and the endless sea waiting to claim me. The day I boarded the ship, I should have felt nothing but excitement. The decks gleamed under the sun, polished brass catching the light like a promise, and the air was thick with laughter, clinking glasses and the sweet scent of salt. It was everything the brochures had promised: luxury, escape, a floating city where the worries of land couldn't reach. Yet the moment my feet touched the gangway, something shifted inside me, as though I had stepped not onto a vessel, but into a waiting mouth. The captain himself greeted passengers near the entrance, his uniform immaculate, his face carved with an expression too practiced to be natural. When my turn came, his eyes lingered on me longer than they should have, and his smile faltered. He leaned in close, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "This ship," he said, "has already sunk once before." I froze, searching, his face for the joke, for the smirk that would undo the weight of his words. But there was nothing, just cold certainty in his gaze before he turned away to greet the next guest. And from that moment I knew this voyage carried something far heavier than pleasure. The first day unfolded like a dream. The ship glided across an ocean so blue it looked painted, sunlight scattering diamonds across the waves. I wandered the decks with a drink in hand, meeting passengers who laughed easily, their faces glowing with the kind of joy only vacations seemed to summon. A group of retirees invited me to join their card game. A young couple shared travel stories at the bar. Everything felt alive, bustling, perfectly curated to distract us from the vast emptiness surrounding us. But cracks appeared quickly. Near the pool, I noticed rust creeping along the metal railings, faint but unmistakable, as though the salt water had chewed away at the ship far longer than it should have. Some cabin doors on the lower deck were swollen, warped like wood left in the rain. Even in the dining hall where chandeliers sparkled and violins played, there was a faint odor beneath the perfume of roasted meat and wine, the sour tang of mildew, wet and hidden. I tried to ignore it, losing myself in the rhythm of the evening. Yet as I ate, I caught the sharp hiss of a whisper. A crew member passing by muttered under his breath words not meant for me. The drowned ones. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. When I asked him what he'd said, he smiled too quickly, shaking his head. Nothing, sir, just tired. He slipped away before I could press further, leaving me staring at his retreating back, my appetite gone. The phrase clung to me like sea spray, impossible to shake. I replayed it in my head as laughter and music swelled around me, the words echoing louder than the orchestra's strings. The drowned ones. It was only the first night, but already the glamour of the ship seemed thinner, a painted mask stretched over something rotten beneath. The next day, the strangeness sharpened. At first, it was just a feeling, a heaviness that clung to me even under the bright sun. The passengers I had laughed with before now seemed off. Their skin looked pale, their eyes glazed, and when I spoke to them, their answers landed too perfectly, like lines recited from a script. One woman told me, "It's such a beautiful day at sea," with a wide smile. An hour later, I passed, her on the deck again, and without missing a beat, she repeated the exact same words in the exact same tone, as if someone had pressed replay. By nightfall, the ship felt suffocating. In my cabin, I lay awake, listening to the hum of the engines. When I heard it, the slow, deliberate slap of footsteps in the hallway. Not the dry thud of shoes, but wet, dragging as though someone had just climbed dripping from the ocean. I opened the door to an empty corridor. The carpet was dry, but the sound still echoed in my ears, seeping into my chest like seawater. The pool unsettled me most. In the blazing afternoon heat, it should have been warm, but when I dipped my hand in, it was ice cold, colder than the ocean itself. And the surface never stilled. Even on windless days, ripples spread across it in steady, unnatural patterns like something beneath was breathing. I started asking questions, careful at first, then more direct. "Has this ship ever had accidents?" I asked a waiter polishing glasses. His hand stilled and his smile turned brittle. "I wouldn't know, sir." Another crew member pretended not to hear me at all, walking briskly away as if I'd asked something indecent. The avoidance only deepened the pit in my stomach. No matter who I asked, the air tightened. Conversations shut down, and I was left standing alone, carrying the weight of a secret everyone else seemed desperate to bury. And when I returned to my cabin that night, the hallway was silent. Until the dripping footsteps started again, stopping just outside my door. I couldn't take the half-answers and forced smiles anymore. If the crew wouldn't tell me what was wrong with this ship, I would find out myself. Late one night, when the halls had gone quiet and most passengers were tucked into their cabins, I slipped past a door marked "Crew Only." The polished wood and carpet vanished instantly, replaced with narrow steel corridors that smelled of rust and brine. The air was colder here, damp enough to cling to my skin. I moved carefully, following the faint hum of machinery, until I found a door ajar. Inside was a cramped office, papers scattered across a desk. I lifted one waterlogged logbook, its ink smeared but still legible. The entries dated back decades, yet each one bore the same ship's name, the very ship I was standing on. I flipped further, and my chest tightened. The last entry described a disaster at sea. "All souls lost." I staggered back, the room suddenly spinning, and that's when I saw them. On the far wall hung plaques, rows of engraved brass plates dulled by salt, names etched deep memorializing passengers long gone. My heart hammered as I scanned the lists, each one tied to the supposed sinking. And then my blood ran cold. I recognized them. Names I had heard just days ago at dinner. Names belonging to the smiling faces I had shared drinks and stories with. Emma, David, Margaret, all carved into metal, memorialized as if they'd been dead for years. My breath grew shallow, panic clawing at me. I stumbled from plaque to plaque, desperate to prove my eyes wrong, but every discovery only deepened the truth. The ship wasn't full of vacationers. It was full of echoes, phantoms trapped in endless repetition, bound to a vessel that had already gone to the bottom of the sea. The air grew heavier, the silence unbearable. I shoved the logbook back, my hands shaking, and fled down the corridor. Every step felt as though the walls were closing in, the weight of all those drowned souls pressing closer, as if they knew I had uncovered their secret. I found the captain, on the upper deck, staring out at the horizon as if he had been waiting for me. The night air was sharp, carrying the endless smell of salt. My heart was hammering, but I forced the words out, telling him everything I had seen, the logs, the plaques, the names that should have belonged to the dead. My voice shook, but my anger carried it. I demanded the truth. He didn't turn to look at me right away. His hands rested on the railing, knuckles pale. And when he finally spoke, his voice was low and strangely heavy. "This ship sank years ago," he said. "Everyone aboard was lost." He finally met my eyes, and the sorrow there hollowed me out. "We keep sailing because the sea won't release us. You were never supposed to be here." The words gutted me, leaving me trembling. Before I could reply, he walked past me, disappearing into the shadows of the deck as if our conversation had never happened. That night, sleep came like a trap. I dreamed of the ocean swallowing me whole, hands dragging me down into the dark, lungs burning with salt water. I jolted awake, choking, only to find my sheets soaked through, my skin clammy and reeking of brine. The nightmare hadn't stayed, in my head, and then the passengers began to change. At breakfast, I watched a man raise his coffee, freeze mid-motion, then flicker, his face swelling, skin graying, eyes clouding like a corpse pulled from the sea. A second later, he reset, alive again, laughing as if nothing had happened. Across the room, a woman's smile melted into a slack, bloated mask before snapping back into perfection. It happened over and over like broken film reels glitching, each one revealing what lay beneath. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. The ship was nothing but a graveyard still pretending to be alive, and I was caught between the two. The final morning was unlike any other. I woke to silence. Not the hum of engines, not the chatter of early risers, not even the rhythmic crash of waves. When I stepped onto the deck, the world was wrong. The ocean stretched endlessly in every direction, but it was flat, still as glass. No gulls, no horizon line, only a blank sky bleeding into blank water. The ship groaned beneath my feet, but it felt less alive and more like a carcass drifting in nothing. And then I saw him. The captain stood at the bow, waiting as though he'd always known I would come. His eyes were calm, almost kind, but his words cut like knives. "You can stay," he said softly, "or you can join the sea." Before I could speak, the deck shuddered. Water surged up between the planks, spilling fast, flooding around my ankles, my waist, my chest. I gasped, but the air was already thick with salt. The ocean swallowed the ship as if it had only been pretending to float. And as the water closed, over my head one thought echoed inside me. Maybe I had been dead from the moment I boarded. The first night on the cruise should have been peaceful. My cabin was quiet, the kind of silence that comes only when you're surrounded by endless miles of sea. I lay in bed, lulled by the faint hum of the ship's engines, when I heard it. The ocean. At first, it was just the sound of waves pressing against the hull, a rhythm I expected. But then, layered in the rush of water, something else slipped through. A voice. It wasn't vague or distant, like a trick of the mind. It was clear. The ocean whispered my name. I sat up, heart pounding, ears straining. The word came again, stretched and curling through the darkness, like the sea itself had shaped my name on its tongue. I laughed nervously, telling myself I was tired, hearing things after a long day of travel. But the more I tried to ignore it, the sharper it became. Low, intimate, deliberate. I pressed my ear to the cabin wall, closer to the porthole, and the sound swelled. The water wasn't just moving, it was speaking to me, calling me. That was the moment the unease set in. A weight I couldn't shake. Something in the deep had noticed me. The first full day at sea felt almost perfect. The kind of day I had hoped for when I booked the trip. The sun blazed overhead, glinting off the water in dazzling shards of light, while the ship buzzed with life. I wandered from deck to deck, losing myself in the chatter of strangers, sipping cocktails I couldn't pronounce, and letting the music of a steel band wash over me. For a while, the strangeness of the night before faded into something I could laugh about, a silly story I'd save for when I got home. I made friends easily, an older couple who loved to gamble, a group of college kids daring each other to try every drink on the menu. We toasted under the afternoon sky, danced near the pool, and filled the hours with the kind of reckless joy that only comes when land feels impossibly far away. By the time dinner rolled around, I felt drunk on more than alcohol. I felt free, but when night fell, the unease returned. Back in my cabin, the laughter and clinking glasses faded into silence. I lay in bed, eyes closed, drifting toward sleep, when I heard it again. My name. This time there was no mistaking it. It wasn't the groan of metal or the push of waves against the hull. It was a voice, soft and deliberate, seeping through the walls. I froze, my skin prickling, every nerve alert. The sound came, again, clearer now, coaxing, as though whatever was out there wasn't just speaking, it was inviting. My breath caught as I pressed my ear to the porthole. Beyond the glass, the sea stretched black and endless, but the voice was there, unmistakable, rising from the depths. My own name, curling upward from beneath the waves. I stumbled back from the window, heart hammering, but the whisper lingered, filling the room even after I squeezed my eyes shut. And in that moment, I knew it wasn't my imagination. The ocean hadn't spoken once by accident. It had called to me again. By the third night, sleep had become impossible. The whispers no longer brushed faintly against the edges of my hearing. They pressed in, louder, layered, like dozens of voices speaking my name all at once. Some sounded mournful, others eager, but together they formed a chorus that rose and fell with the swell of the waves. I buried my head under the pillow, but the sound seeped through, vibrating in my bones as though the ocean itself had climbed inside me. The days offered no comfort. At first, everything seemed normal, the laughter, the music, the clatter of silverware, but then the crack showed. I noticed passengers moving strangely, almost in unison. A group of strangers lifted their drinks at the exact same second, set them down together, and laughed in perfect rhythm. By the pool, 3 children jumped into the water at the same instant, their splashes merging like a single sound. Even in the dining hall, when I looked up from my plate, it felt as though every eye turned toward me at once, then quickly looked away. I started noticing water where it shouldn't be, damp footprints trailing down empty hallways, drops of seawater falling from the ceiling with no source above. Once I caught my reflection in a glass window and saw it linger an extra heartbeat after I had turned away, its eyes still locked on mine. I confided in a woman I'd been speaking with since the first day, someone I thought I could trust. Words tumbled out, about the voices, the strange behavior, the things I couldn't explain. She listened quietly, her face pale, her glass untouched. When I finally stopped, she reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and whispered, "Don't. Listen when it calls." But the next morning she walked past me on deck as though I were a stranger. No recognition, no hesitation, just an empty smile before she turned away. That was when the doubt began to gnaw at me. Was I truly hearing these things? Seeing these patterns? Or was I unraveling in the middle of the sea, losing myself to isolation and paranoia? Still, every night the ocean whispered my name louder, and I couldn't deny it wanted me. I couldn't keep drifting between terror at night and denial by day. The whispers were growing bolder, and the passengers' eerie synchronicity gnawed at me until I couldn't stand it anymore. If no one else would give me answers, I would tear them from the ship itself. One night, when most of the guests were asleep, I slipped past a door marked Crew Only. The difference was immediate. The bright carpets and polished wood gave way to narrow steel halls, walls streaked with rust, the air thick with damp. I trailed my hand along the surface and felt moisture seeping through, as though the ocean was slowly reclaiming the ship from the inside out. Pipes hissed overhead, dripping salt water in steady beats that echoed like a pulse. As I crept deeper, I heard voices. I froze, pressing myself into the shadows. 2 crew members walked past, their whispers sharp, urgent. I caught only fragments, but one phrase chilled me. The chosen ones who hear the call. My blood ran cold. They knew. They had always known. Further in, I found a room half hidden behind a rusted hatch. Inside, the air was heavy with mildew and stacks of swollen folders lay scattered across a warped desk. My hands trembled as I opened one. Passenger records, names, cabins, notes, each page warped by water damage, ink bleeding across the paper, but the words were still legible enough to pierce me. Disappeared at sea. Last heard voices. Claimed by the call. I flipped page after page, each one describing someone who had vanished during a voyage. Their fates whispered away into the water. Then I saw the worst of it. Passenger lists from past cruises, names that matched the very people I had met this trip. Emma, David, Margaret. Their disappearances recorded years ago, long before I ever stepped aboard. My hand shook, the papers slipping from my grip. It wasn't my imagination. The whispers weren't madness. They were a warning, or worse, an invitation. And everyone around me wasn't just oblivious. They were remnants, echoes of those who had already answered the ocean's call. I found the captain on the observation deck, his silhouette framed against the endless horizon. My chest burned with questions, with rage, with fear. And when I demanded answers, his expression didn't change. He looked at me as though he'd been expecting this moment all along. I told him about the whispers, about the records hidden below, about the passengers whose names should have belonged to the dead. My voice cracked, but I pushed the words out, desperate for him to deny it. He didn't. Instead, he sighed, a sound that seemed heavier than the sea itself. Some passengers are claimed, he said, his tone flat, almost mournful. The ocean chooses. We cannot stop it, we cannot fight it. And once it begins to call, there is no escape. His words hollowed me out. I waited for him to laugh, to tell me I was imagining things, but his eyes only held pity, like a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. Before I could press him, he turned and walked away, leaving me trembling in the dark. That night, I didn't bother trying to sleep. The whispers no longer crept. They roared, filling every corner of my cabin, pouring through the walls in waves. My name echoed from every direction, urgent now, irresistible. My body tingled with a strange pull, like invisible hands urging me upward, toward the deck. I couldn't resist. My feet carried me down the silent hallways, up the stairs, until I stepped into the night air. The deck stretched before me, eerily still, and that's when I saw them. Figures lined the railing, their forms pale in the moonlight, gazes fixed on the water below. Their stillness was unnatural, their silence suffocating. As I drew closer, my stomach turned. Some of them were faces I knew, passengers I'd spoken with, shared meals with, laughed beside. But their eyes were glassy, their expressions slack, as if they weren't truly alive anymore. Together, they stared into the black, endless sea, waiting. And beneath their silence, the whispers rose louder than ever, all of them shaping my name, pulling me to the edge. The final night, there was no pretending. The whispers didn't slip through the walls anymore. They thundered inside my skull, 1,000 overlapping voices chanting my name until it was all I could hear. My body moved on its own, pulled through the corridors, up the stairwells, until I was standing at the railing beneath a moonless sky. The ocean stretched black and endless, swallowing every trace of light. My breath came shallow, my knuckles white against the rail as the voices swelled into a single command. Come closer. I leaned forward, trembling, and the water shifted. Faces emerged from the depths, pale and glistening, their eyes wide and unblinking. They smiled in unison, mouths opening and closing in perfect rhythm, each one forming my name. I recognized some of them, passengers I'd spoken to days earlier, their laughter still fresh in my memory. Now their expressions were serene, welcoming, as though they had been waiting only for me. My pulse raced, but before I could step back, something icy wrapped around my wrist. A hand, slick, strong, unmistakably real, tugged hard, pulling me toward the sea, and then the world tipped and everything went black. I sat across from the ship's doctor, the sterile smell of antiseptic mixing oddly with the salty air drifting in from the porthole. His hands trembled as he clutched the clipboard like it might anchor him to reality. I checked your vitals. 3 times, he said, voice hoarse. Your heart isn't beating, you shouldn't be alive. I laughed, or tried to, but the sound caught in my throat. That's not funny, I said, scanning his face for any hint of a joke. There was none. Just pure, unfiltered fear. Feel your pulse, he whispered. I did. Nothing. Cold skin. Still. Outside, the fog pressed, thick against the windows like a living thing, swallowing the horizon. The once charming hum of the engines now sounded like a growl beneath my feet. Somewhere down the corridor, I swore I heard murmuring, soft, syncopated, almost like chanting. I stood up too fast, dizziness crashing over me like a wave. The room spun, or maybe it was the ship, or maybe it was me. Tell me what's happening, I snapped. He backed away. I don't know how you got back, he said. But I signed your death certificate. 3 days ago, I won the trip in a contest I didn't remember entering. Congratulations, the email had said. You've been selected for a luxury solo voyage aboard the Mistral Eternus. At first I thought it was a scam, but the ticket came, legit, as could be. Boarding pass, suite assignment, even a prepaid travel stipend. Everything felt a little too perfect. The ship was massive, gleaming under a cloud-choked sky. Staff smiled wide, too wide. Passengers moved like they were in a dream, pleasant but vague, like they didn't really know why they were there. Aishao chalked it up to rich people weirdness. The first red flag? No cell signal, not even Wi-Fi. We're in satellite silence, a crew member said, smiling blankly. That night, I noticed the mirrors in my cabin felt wrong, like they lagged, half a second behind my movements. I tried to ignore it, but the next morning I woke up with bruises on my arms, thin, dark lines, like someone had grabbed me while I slept. I convinced myself I'd tossed and turned, but by the 3rd night, I had scratches down my side. Then there was the crew member, pale, glassy-eyed, who brushed past me in the hallway and whispered, "Don't go below deck 13. I laughed, uneasy. There is no deck 13. He didn't answer, just kept walking. By the 4th day, I could barely stand. Waves of nausea crashed into me even when the sea was calm. Lights pulsed too bright, sounds came warped. It felt like my body was slipping out of sync with the rest of the world. I stumbled, my way back to the infirmary. The doctor looked up, his face stiffening the moment he saw me. He didn't greet me, just stared, like he was seeing something he couldn't explain. He motioned me to sit, took my pulse again. His hand froze. Still nothing, he muttered, barely audible. He stood abruptly and locked the infirmary door, behind me. "Come with me," he said. He led me past a row of curtained beds into a small office. The air was heavier there, stale. He opened a filing cabinet and yanked out a folder. Then another, and another. They all had my name on them, dozens of them. Same name, same birth date, same medical notes, dated weeks, months, even years before this trip. I backed away. What the hell is this? He didn't answer, just unlocked a drawer in his desk and pulled out a photo, slid it across. It was a corpse, bloated, bluish, lips curled in a final breath. It was me. Below the image, autopsy notes scrawled in the doctor's handwriting. Cause of death, drowning. Time of death, 3:17 a.m., location pool deck. No, I said, that's not me, that's not possible. The doctor looked at me with eyes that had stopped pretending. This isn't your first time on this ship. My mouth went dry. You've died here before, he whispered. More than once. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo, the dead version of me. The bruises, the cold skin, the timestamp, it wasn't a trick, the doctor hadn't faked it. I felt the truth of it somewhere deep inside. The next morning, I cornered a younger crew member while he was restocking towels. He flinched when I grabbed his arm. Tell me how to get to Deck 13. There is no Deck 13, he said automatically, just like they all did. I know it's real, I hissed. I'm not leaving until you tell me. He looked around, sweating, then leaned in. Behind the linen closet on Deck 6, there's a hatch. Don't stay long. I didn't even thank him. I ran. Behind stacks of towels and bleach, I found a warped metal panel. It creaked open to a narrow, rust-covered stairwell spiraling down. No signs. No lights. Deck 13 smelled like rot. Pipes groaned above me, and the walls wept black mold. The air was wet and wrong, like I'd stepped into something's lungs. Then I heard it. Soft, broken sobs echoing in the dark. Human, but stretched. One room was filled with forgotten luggage, decades old. I froze when I saw a bag with my name on it. Inside, clothes identical to the ones I was wearing, only they were soaked in dried blood. I stumbled back. That's when I saw the screen. An old CRT monitor flickered to life. Security footage. It showed me 4 nights ago walking alone to the pool deck. I climbed the railing. I jumped. No struggle, no accident. I chose to drown. I burst into the infirmary, the stench of mold still clinging to my clothes. I saw it. I shouted. The footage, me, jumping into the pool. What the hell is happening to me? The doctor didn't flinch. He just looked tired, older somehow, like he'd aged in the hours since we last spoke. You weren't supposed to see that, he said quietly. I need answers. He sighed and motioned for me to sit. This ship, he began, isn't a ship anymore. It's a loop, a trap. It catches people right at the moment their lives fracture. People with guilt, with unfinished stories. They die here. But the ship doesn't let them go. That's insane. He nodded. So is coming back from the dead. He placed a hand on my arm, not unkindly. You didn't kill yourself. You drowned saving a child. There was a storm. She slipped. You dove in after her. I opened my mouth to argue, but something snapped in my brain. A memory. The wind, the panic, a tiny hand slipping from mine beneath black waves. Then CPR. Then light. Then nothing. No, I whispered. That didn't happen, I'd remember. You do remember. It's just coming back in pieces. He leaned closer. But you weren't meant to return. And now the ship knows you're here. My skin crawled. So what now? His eyes darkened. Now? It tries to keep you. Every loop, it gets harder to remember who you were. What was real? I clutched the edge of the chair to keep from falling. I don't want to forget. That's the first thing everyone says, he murmured, right before they do. That night, I stood at the edge of the railing, wind clawing at my skin, the ocean below black and endless. If dying had trapped me here, maybe dying again could set me free. Maybe this time, I'd wake up somewhere else, somewhere real. I closed my eyes, took one breath, and I jumped. The cold hit like a punch, then silence, peace, darkness, But when I opened my eyes, I was back in my cabin. Same bed, same creaking pipes, same scratches on my arms. The intercom crackled with the same cheerful morning greeting. "Good morning, passengers. Breakfast is now being served on Deck 9. My chest tightened. I sat up slowly. Everything was exactly the same, down to the water glass on the nightstand. The ship had reset, a soft knock at the door. I didn't want to answer. I already knew. The door creaked open and the doctor stepped inside. His smile was hollow this time, drained of anything human. "We have to start your checkup." Again. I stared at him, trembling. This time I scream. But I already know no one hears me. I slammed open the door to the security office, breath ragged, heart clawing at my chest like it was trying to get out. "I need to see the footage," I said, louder than I meant to. The officer behind the desk blinked at me, startled. "From where?" "Deck 7A, I said. "Last night, around 11. "I was there. I saw them. All of them." He stared. "There's no Deck 7A. "Yes, there is," I snapped. "I walked the hallway. I talked to people. There was music, a ballroom. My grandmother was there. She died 5 years ago. But she looked alive. She knew me." He tapped his keyboard slowly, humorlessly. "Sir, our ship has 10 decks. There's no 7A. I shoved the map at him, fingers shaking. "It's not on the blueprint, I know that. But it's real. I was there." He pushed the map back gently, like I was a kid having a tantrum. "Maybe it was a dream, a stress episode. The sea can do that. But I know what I saw. I smelled her perfume. I held her hand, and I heard her whisper, 'It's not your time, yet, but soon you'll stay.' It started with an email. 'Congratulations. You've been selected for a complimentary luxury cruise.' I don't remember entering anything, but the ticket looked legit. First-class suite, all-inclusive. I was between jobs and figured, why not? A free vacation. I boarded alone, no expectations, just ocean and silence for a week. The Andara Vela was massive. Golden chandeliers, marble floors, smiling staff. Everything had that too-perfect sheen, like a dream I wasn't meant to question. The first few days passed in a blur of poolside cocktails and polite small talk. It felt like I was floating outside my own life, detached but content. But then on the third night I heard music. Faint, old-timey swing music. It drifted from behind a crew-only door near the back stairwell. I paused, ear against the metal, and heard laughter. Glass clinking. The unmistakable sound of a party. Curiosity dragged me down. The door was locked, but something gave, like it wanted me to enter. The air shifted as I stepped through. The lighting dimmed. The walls narrowed. The stairwell led to a hallway I'd never seen before. Salt hung thick in the air and the floor creaked like old wood beneath the carpet. A small brass plate read, Deck 7A. I should have turned back, but I didn't. At the end of the hallway was a ballroom, glowing gold. Inside, people danced in vintage. Attire, 1920s flappers, men in naval uniforms, women with lace gloves and pearl necklaces. They all looked impossibly real. Too real. And then I saw her, my grandmother. She wore the same blue dress she was buried in. Same smile, same perfume, jasmine and lilac. She looked right at me. "Darling," she said, like she'd just seen me yesterday. "You finally made it." I told myself I wouldn't go back, that it had been some stress-induced hallucination, or a dream, brought on by too much sun and too many Mai Tais. But the next night, around the same time, I found myself drifting toward that same stairwell like something was pulling me. The door opened without resistance. I didn't even hesitate. Down the creaking steps. Past the salt-stained wallpaper. Back to the ballroom. They were all still there. Dancing, laughing. Glasses raised mid-toast. It was like I'd never left. This time I spoke to them. A man in a gray double-breasted suit told me about a war in Asia, one that hasn't happened yet. A teenage girl in a beehive hairstyle recited a quote from my old college professor, someone she should never have known. But it was the woman in the corner who rattled me. She was elderly, wrapped in a velvet shawl, humming to herself. The tune froze me mid-step. It was a lullaby. My mother used to sing it to me when I had nightmares as a child. It was never recorded, never written down. Just ours. When I asked her where she heard it, she smiled with glassy eyes and said, "From you, dear. You always hum it in your sleep." The hair on my neck rose. I needed air. I stumbled into a hallway off the ballroom, dim and quiet, and found a small door cracked open. Inside was what looked like an old office. Dust-covered bookshelves, rusted metal drawers, and a massive wooden desk. I rifled through drawers, desperate for something, anything to prove this was real. That's when I found it. A manifest. Hundreds of names typed neatly in columns, dates, some decades old, some from this year. Then I saw mine. Last name, first name, room 406, scheduled June 12th. My stomach twisted. That was 3 days from now. Scheduled for what? After I saw my name on that manifest, I didn't go back. I couldn't. I avoided that stairwell like it was radioactive. I kept to the upper decks, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it all, that it was some twisted dream stitched together by grief and ocean air. But the ship had changed. The elevator to my floor started stopping on levels I didn't recognize. Doors would open to black hallways that smelled like seawater and rust. Once the walls were covered in handprints, wet, smeared, clawing upward. The daily announcements changed too. First it was the language, Russian, then Latin, then something I didn't recognize at all. A guttural, clicking dialect that made my ears ring. Then the voices changed. They weren't human. And the people, they looked the same, mostly. But something was off. They repeated conversations word for word, like broken recordings. One woman asked me if I'd seen her husband 3 times in a row, each with the exact same inflection. A waiter forgot his own name mid-sentence. I tried to get help. I told a guest services agent about Deck 7A. Her smile didn't falter. "There is no Deck 7A, she said, but her left eye twitched uncontrollably the entire time. That night, I stayed in my cabin with the lights on, and the deadbolt latched. But around 2 a.m. the lights flickered. My door unlocked on its own. I didn't walk to Deck 7A. I was pulled. Every corridor bent toward it. Every staircase led down. I screamed. I fought. But gravity itself seemed to guide me like a puppet. The ballroom was darker now, candles instead of chandeliers. The music was slow, warped, dragging. They were waiting, and at the center of it all, my grandmother. She looked different this time. Paler, eyes shadowed and empty. "You weren't supposed to leave," she said softly. "Once you see us, you're one of us." And behind her, they all turned to look at me, smiling, waiting. I ran. I don't even remember how my legs moved, only that I needed to get away from that room, those eyes, that voice. The music chased me down the corridor, swelling behind me like a tide. I threw myself against a door and it burst open, only to lead right back into the ballroom. Every exit curved. Every hallway folded in on itself like the ship was rearranging. Just to trap me, I screamed for help, pounded on walls. I tore through stairwells and supply closets, calling for anyone real. No one came. The few passengers I passed just stared, blankly smiling, like I was invisible. I burst through a rusted metal door marked Archives. Inside, the air was still. Dust floated like it had been undisturbed for decades. A row of old lockers lined the wall. Something compelled me to look. The fourth one down was slightly ajar. I pulled it open. Inside hung a crew uniform, freshly pressed, neatly folded. My name was stitched into the breast pocket. Below it, a brass plaque read, "In Memoriam." Departed, but still aboard. I fell backward, choking on my breath. That's when she appeared again, my grandmother. Only now her skin looked waterlogged. Her dress clung to her like it had never dried. "This ship," she whispered, finds people teetering on the edge, lost souls, lonely ones. You were already halfway gone when you boarded. That's why you saw us. My heart pounded. You died on this ship? She nodded. A long time ago. I drowned, just like you almost did, remember? Images flashed, blurred headlights, cold water, my chest rising from CPR. A stranger's voice saying, "We almost lost him." "You were between places," she said gently. "That's when the ship found you." "No," I said, shaking. "I survived." "Only partly," she whispered. "The rest of you stayed with us." The floor groaned beneath me like it was breathing. The room darkened. And then, the ballroom music began again. Slower this time, but still calling me back. I woke up in my cabin gasping like I'd been underwater. The lights were soft, the curtains swayed with the rhythm of the ocean. Everything looked normal, neat, untouched, like nothing had happened. Maybe it was a nightmare, a long, vivid hallucination. But then I noticed something. My clothes were gone. In their place, laid out neatly on the bed, was a crisp, vintage suit, black and silver, the kind you'd wear to a ballroom in the 1940s. A knock came at the door. "Room service," a voice called, but when I opened it, no cart waited, no smiling server, just the hallway, dimly lit. Faint golden glow reflecting off the walls. And that music. That same old melody. Soft, haunting, familiar. Deck 7A. A figure stepped forward from the shadows, dressed in lace gloves and pearls. She smiled. "You're late for the dance." I turned to call out, to ask someone, anyone, what was going on, but I couldn't remember my own name. Not fully, not clearly. The hallway pulsed with warm light and distant laughter. I stepped forward. Maybe I didn't win this cruise. Maybe I was invited back. I remember the exact second the lights went out. One moment, the grand halls of the cruise ship shimmered with golden light and laughter. The next, pitch black silence, so sudden it stole the breath from my lungs. And then, out of nowhere, a scream, high-pitched, human. It tore through the darkness like a razor across silk. I froze, heart hammering against my ribs. Then the lights snapped back on. Everything looked the same. But 5 people were missing. No one saw them leave. No calls for help. No splashes in the water. They were just gone. We were in the middle of the Pacific. No land for miles. The sea calm. The sky clear. The crew said it was a power surge, a technical hiccup. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And more terrifying than the vanishing was how quickly everyone forgot. Their names, their faces. It was like they'd never been there. Except I remember everything. People think cruise ships are about luxury and freedom. But I'm here to tell you, sometimes they take more than they give. And once the mirage of the sea takes something, it doesn't give it back. The day I boarded the Mirage of the Sea, the sun was blazing over the Pacific like a spotlight on a stage, and I, along with hundreds of others, stepped onto what looked like floating paradise. Everything about the ship was pristine. The decks gleamed like polished glass, the staff greeted us with almost robotic precision and unsettlingly perfect smiles, and a soft orchestral melody played in the background, as if scripted for a movie. My cabin was spotless, almost too spotless, like it had never been touched by another human. On the bed sat a glossy welcome brochure with elegant gold lettering. But beneath the printed itinerary and poolside drink menus, a single line in thin italic font stood out like a whisper. "No returning once you're seen." I stared at it for a moment, unsure if it was a misprint or some bizarre slogan. Either way, it made my skin crawl. At dinner that night, I met a few people who made the ship feel more alive. Liam and Marissa, a newlywed couple glowing with post-honeymoon bliss, invited me to join them at their table. Then there was Tommy, a pale, quiet boy around 6. with wide, watchful eyes, sitting beside his stern, silent grandmother. Something about the way he gripped her hand like a lifeline made my stomach twist. Still, everything looked normal. The parties were vibrant. The water sparkled. But sometimes, just for a second, the reflections in the mirrors didn't match the people standing in front of them. Once, as I passed the hallway near the spa, I saw a staff member staring at the wall, unmoving, like she'd frozen mid-task. When she noticed me watching, her smile snapped back into place. At night, it was worse. I'd lie in bed, unable to sleep, feeling eyes on me from the vent above, the closet door, the mirror across the room. The air felt too still, like the ship held its breath while we slept. Everyone else seemed enchanted by the luxury. But beneath the polished surface, something was wrong. It was subtle, quiet, but it was there, lurking just beyond the edges of every bright hallway and hollow smile. It happened 3 nights in. A storm rolled in fast, unnaturally fast. One moment the ocean was calm, the next, it was a writhing mass of black waves crashing against the hull. Thunder cracked like bones snapping in the sky. Most of us were gathered in the lounge, watching the lightning dance through the panoramic windows, sipping cocktails and pretending we weren't nervous. Then, without warning, the lights died. Total blackout. Not even the emergency lights kicked in. Just black. The kind of black that makes you forget your own shape. And in that void, 12 seconds stretched into an eternity. No music. No crew. Just the groaning of the ship and the quiet sound of someone whispering far too close to my ear. When the lights came back, the storm had calmed. But something was wrong. There were screams, frantic shouting. Liam and Marissa, gone. Their seats, empty, drinks untouched. Their laughter, gone like it had never existed. I rushed to the staff, demanding answers. "Who?" the bartender asked with a blank smile. "I don't think we've had any guests by those names." He didn't even blink. I found a woman I'd met the day before, someone who'd chatted with Marissa about her wedding dress. When I brought it up, she tilted her head like I was speaking gibberish. "I think you've had too much to drink," she said softly, eyes avoiding mine. But I knew they had been real. I remembered Marissa's chipped pink nail polish, Liam's stupid pineapple shirt. We had laughed over shrimp cocktails just the night before. In my room, hands trembling, I pulled up the selfie we'd taken at dinner. I stared at the screen, my breath catching. There I was, smiling awkwardly. And beside me? Nothing. Just 2 empty chairs. Like they'd never sat there. Like the world had photoshopped them out of existence. I dropped the phone. Suddenly, I wasn't sure what terrified me more, that they were gone, or that no one else wanted to remember they'd ever been here at all. And that whisper during the blackout, it hadn't come from nowhere. Someone, or something, had been there with us in that darkness, and it had taken them. By the next morning, I was losing my grip. I kept waiting for someone, anyone, to scream, to panic, to notice the vanishing of Liam and Marissa. But nothing. Deck yoga resumed. Buffets reopened. It was like the world had clicked reset. But then I met Heather. She found me on the observation deck clutching that cursed photo. "You remember them too," she said quietly, without even asking. She introduced me to 2 others, Raj and Marcus. They'd each lost someone too. A sister, a best friend. All gone in the blackout. All erased from every camera, list, and mind except ours. Together, we started searching. We didn't trust the elevators anymore. We took the stairs, down, past the crew-only signs, deeper than the deck maps ever showed. The carpet changed, walls peeled with moisture. And then we saw it. An unmarked hallway we knew wasn't there before. The lights buzzed dim and yellow, and at the end, a thick steel door carved with deep scratches, not letters, symbols, primitive, wrong. We didn't open it. Couldn't. That night we met again, whispering in a half-lit corner near the engine room, trying to make sense of what we'd seen. "The ship's shifting," Raj muttered. "Like it's growing." And then, Darkness. This time it lasted only 6 seconds, but when the lights flickered back, Heather was gone. I turned, breath hitching. "Where's Heather?" I asked, panic rising. "Who?" Raj blinked. "It's just us, man." I stared at them, horrified. Heather had been right beside me. Her voice still echoed in my ears. I shouted her name, but they looked at me like I was unraveling, just like before. We stumbled into a nearby maintenance room. On the far wall was a dusty CCTV monitor. I wiped it clean and it buzzed to life, flickering between camera feeds. And then we saw it, a black, spindly figure, impossibly tall and thin, dragging something limp down the hallway we'd just been in. No face, no sound, just long limbs pulling Heather's body through a door that wasn't supposed to exist. Raj screamed. Marcus fell silent. And me. I finally understood. The Mirage of the Sea wasn't just haunted. It was alive, and it was hungry. Stopped sleeping. Stopped eating. I had to know what was happening before it took me to. Marcus and Raj faded, gradually, like mist under sunlight. By the end of the next day, neither remembered Heather or our searches, or even me. They still smiled, waved, but their eyes were vacant, hollow. I found the old records by accident, tucked deep in the cruise library behind a locked glass case, mislabeled as decorative archives. Inside was a brittle leather-bound logbook, half-burnt, water-damaged. The ship's original name wasn't Mirage of the Sea. It was the Virelai, decommissioned in 1939 after reports of entire passenger lists vanishing mid-voyage. The names? I scanned them with trembling fingers. Liam Matthews, Marissa Cole, Raj Patel, passengers from my cruise, listed in a ledger 86 years old. I confronted a steward, asked why our names were in an old manifest. He stared through me like I'd spoken in tongues. "Perhaps you need rest," he said, smiling thinly. "Sometimes the sea makes people confused." Gaslighting. Perfection in its cruelty. But I wasn't alone. Below Deck 5 I found a locked cabin. Inside a man sat curled in the corner, mute, with empty eyes and trembling hands. A former crew member, by his uniform. He couldn't speak, but, he wrote, page after page in the margins of old menus, towels, anything he could find. His scrawl was wild, barely legible, but the message was always the same. It feeds when unseen, it resets, don't blink. That night the power went out again. This time I didn't run. I hid behind a laundry cart and waited, barely breathing. In the silence I heard wet sounds, slithering, and then I saw it, crawling down the corridor like a spider dragging its limbs. Not a shadow, but something that refracted light, like a broken mirror floating through space. As it moved, a tear opened in the hallway wall, shimmering, bending reality like heat above asphalt. One by one, people were pulled in, not screaming, just vanishing. And above us, through the glass ceiling, I saw the stars, but they were wrong. Not constellations, just patterns I'd never seen, blinking slowly like eyes. The Mirage of the Sea wasn't drifting the ocean anymore. It was drifting somewhere else. I don't remember climbing into the lifeboat. I just remember the cold, the silence, and the unbearable weight of knowing I was the only one left. I drifted for 2 days before a cargo ship found me, delirious and sunburnt, clutching a soaked page and a dead phone. They didn't believe me. No one did. The official report claims Mirage of the Sea completed its voyage without incident. All passengers accounted for. No record of a blackout, no disappearances, just a confused man found lost at sea. They called it trauma, delusion, stress, but I still have the photo, the one that once showed me with Liam and Marissa. Now it's just me, 3 chairs, empty, and the page from the manifest, the ink's faded, but you can still read the last name on the list. Mine. I moved far inland, avoided oceans, tried to start over, but some nights, like tonight, I hear a humming just outside my window, like an engine purring deep underwater, and the lights, they flicker. I'm not crazy. I remember. I survived. But if you ever find yourself on a ship that feels too perfect, check the mirrors. And whatever you do, don't blink. I don't know how long I've been out here anymore. The days blur together, but one thing hasn't changed. That island. Same jagged rocks, same dead trees clinging to the cliffside like charred fingers. Every morning it's there on the horizon, staring back at us like it's waiting. At first, I thought it was just part of the route, some distant landmark we passed occasionally. But it never faded. It never moved. No matter how far we sailed, it was always there. Like the ship was tethered to it. When I asked the crew about it, they looked at me like I was asking about a ghost. What island? One of them said, not even blinking. I pointed straight at it, clear as day, and he just smiled and walked away. I know I sound insane. Maybe I am. But this cruise, this so-called escape, has become a loop. A trap dressed in white linens and endless shrimp cocktails. I don't know what's real anymore, but I know that island is. And I know this ship isn't taking us anywhere. We're sailing in circles. And the worst part? No one else seems to notice. Or maybe they already have. And it's too late for them. When I first stepped onto the ship, I actually smiled. Like, really smiled. For the first time in months. I needed this. After everything that had gone wrong last year, my breakup, the layoff, the death in the family, I thought a solo cruise would be the reset button my life so desperately needed. And at first it was perfect. The ocean was calm, the sunsets were cinematic, and the food, endless and indulgent. It felt like a dream too good to question. Everyone was so damn friendly. Passengers chatted like old friends. The staff catered to every whim, and the entertainment was non-stop. Live music, pool parties, fancy dinners under string lights. It was the kind of joy that felt curated, but I didn't care. I drank it in. But by day 3, I noticed the island. Small, jagged, covered in black rock with a single crooked tree near its peak. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Maybe we were sailing a loop around a region. But when I saw it again on day 4, and again on day 5, always in the same position on the horizon, always watching, I started to feel it in my chest, that creeping wrongness. I asked a bartender where we were docked next. He smiled, but his answer didn't match the ship's printed itinerary. Then I checked the digital map on the wall outside my cabin, and it was blank. Just blue. No dots, no route, no landmasses. Nothing. That night, during karaoke, a man I hadn't seen before sat beside me, his eyes glassy, mouth curled into a lazy grin. "We never left the loop," he said, his voice dreamy, far away. I laughed awkwardly, thinking he was drunk. But then he just stared forward. Still. Silent. I touched his shoulder and he flinched like I'd shocked him. He stood and walked away without another word. After that, I started watching the others more closely. Some smiled too much. Some barely blinked. And all of them, somehow, acted like time didn't matter anymore. Maybe it didn't. Maybe this place, this ship, wasn't about relaxation. Maybe it was about forgetting. And something deep inside me whispered, "Don't get too comfortable." I started taking photos of the island each morning. Same rock formations, same slumped tree, same soft light breaking, behind it like a tired sunrise. I compared timestamps, angles, shadows, everything matched. We weren't circling a region, we were stuck in a loop, a perfect, seamless circle. I took my evidence to the captain. I waited outside the restricted bridge for nearly an hour before he appeared, polished and pleasant like he'd stepped out of a brochure. I showed him the photos, tried to explain. He looked at me, then smiled and said, "You're not the first to notice." Just like that, no shock, no concern, just resignation. Then he walked past me and disappeared behind a steel door that sealed shut with a mechanical hiss. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the room, checked the door 3 times, locked it twice. Around 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps directly above me. But I was on the top deck. There was no floor above. The sound was deliberate, slow, heavy pacing, then sudden stillness, like someone was listening. The next day, I met a man named Harris sitting alone at the back of the observation lounge. He was shaking, knuckles white around a half-empty glass. I asked if he was okay. He didn't answer right away. Then, in a hoarse whisper, he said, "This ship doesn't dock anymore." I leaned in. "Why not?" He looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Because there's nowhere left to dock. They vanished, like everything else." Before I could respond, he stood and left, vanishing into the crowd like a ghost. I ran back to my cabin and tried everything. The ship's Wi-Fi was temporarily unavailable. My satellite phone wouldn't connect. No signal, no emergency channels, just silence. I started writing everything down. Notes, dates, names. But even those started to feel slippery in my mind, like sand slipping through my fingers. One day melted into the next. The crew kept smiling. The passengers kept laughing. The same song played every afternoon by the pool, and every night the island came back. Whatever this was, it wasn't a glitch in the itinerary. It was a prison, and we were never meant to leave. I woke up to silence, not the usual hum of music from the pool deck or footsteps in the hallway. Just nothing. When I stepped out of my cabin, the air felt heavier, like something had shifted. I went to find Harris. Gone, his cabin empty, no luggage, no signs he'd ever been there. The nameplate outside his door just read, "Vacant." I checked with the front desk, asked if Harris Everly was still on board. The woman behind the counter tilted her head, confused. "We don't have a passenger by that name," she said, her smile fixed in place. "Are you sure you're not misremembering?" I asked about 2 other passengers I'd spoken to at dinner just the night before. Same response. Their rooms were unoccupied. Their names weren't on the registry. I started asking other passengers. Most just blinked at me, polite but distant. One woman laughed and said, "Oh, people come and go all the time." That night, a dense fog rolled in, thick enough to swallow the entire horizon. I stood on the deck trying to see through it, when something brushed the side of the ship. Not waves, not wind, something solid, slow, heavy. It made the whole vessel groan. Panic creeping in, I slipped into the galley through the service hallway, hoping to find a quiet place to think. That's when I saw it, wedged behind an old freezer, a water-damaged logbook with the ship's original name, the Odessa. The last official entry was dated 5 years ago. Declared lost at sea. All communications ceased, presumed gone. Flipped through the pages, heart pounding, until I found a printed passenger manifest, names I recognized. Mine included. But the date next to my name was from 2 years ago, and I hadn't aged a day. It didn't make sense. I couldn't remember more than a week on board. A few days of sunbathing and poolside cocktails. How could that equal years, unless time didn't work here? Unless we weren't just lost at sea. I felt it then, deep in my bones. This wasn't a cruise anymore. It was a limbo, and the ship wasn't letting anyone leave. I became obsessed with the island. Every morning I stood at the railing with binoculars, tracking every detail, every stone, every shadow. At first it looked deserted, but then I saw them, shapes, moving between the trees, not animals, not people. Just wrong. The way they moved, fast but jerky, like marionettes with broken strings. Each time we circled back, the shapes were closer to the shore. They'd stand there still, just watching. I counted 7 at first, then 9, then 12. No one else seemed to notice, or worse, they pretended not to, and the water, God, the water stopped moving. It was flat like glass, no ripples, no waves, not even when the wind picked up. The ship wasn't slicing through it anymore, it was floating. Motionless. One night the engine cut off completely. I didn't even hear the usual creaks and groans, just silence. I ran to the top deck and there it was, the island, closer than ever. Close enough to see that the shapes were no longer standing on land. They were in the water now. That's when I saw a woman sprint across the deck and throw herself overboard, screaming, "I'd rather drown than be seen." Her splash echoed like a gunshot. And then, nothing. I leaned over the railing, breath caught in my throat, and the surface of the sea changed. I saw them. Dozens, maybe hundreds of pale, bloated faces just beneath the waterline, all turned upward. Watching, expressionless, as if waiting. I stumbled back in horror and ran through the halls looking for help. But the crew, they weren't right. They repeated things word for word like broken recordings. "Please enjoy your stay aboard the Mirage." Over and over. No blinking, no emotion. One crewman dropped a tray, and when I looked closer I saw blood smeared across his hands. But he didn't seem to notice. Just bent down, picked it up and said, "Please enjoy your stay aboard the Mirage." It hit me then. This ship wasn't just sailing in circles, it was part of something else. Something ancient. It didn't want us to dock because it wasn't meant to. We weren't passengers anymore. We were offerings. I snapped. Somewhere between the silence, the faces in the water, and the crew's hollow smiles, something in me cracked wide open. I found an unlocked lifeboat near the loading bay, dropped it without a sound, and paddled toward the island. My arms burned, with every stroke, but I didn't stop. I couldn't, yet no matter how far I rowed, the ship stayed the same distance behind me, like it was tethered to me, like it was watching. The island loomed ahead, but it wasn't right. It shifted as I approached. Rocks moved. Trees changed shape. At one point it looked like a jagged skull, then something worse, something that breathed. The closer I got, the more it twisted, reshaping itself like it knew I was watching. I don't remember capsizing. I just remember the cold, black water and a chorus of whispers beneath the surface. Then, nothing. I woke up in my cabin, dry, dressed. The bed made. Outside, passengers laughed by the pool. The morning announcements chirped cheerfully. "Welcome aboard. Today is day 1 of your luxury voyage." The same music played, same buffet, same smiles. But through my porthole, I see it, waiting on the horizon. That same island, still watching.